On March 14, 1849, the county courthouse in Lowndes County, Alabama, burned completely to the ground in what local officials described as a tragic accident caused by an overturned oil lamp. But when investigators searched through the wreckage, they discovered something that did not fit the official explanation. In the basement, they found 3 sets of human remains, each one still fastened to iron rings drilled deep into the stone walls. Every Clark's document from 1847 to 1849 had been lost in the fire, including property deeds, marriage certificates, and most importantly, the probate papers for the Sutton estate. For more than a century, families from Lowndes County have quietly talked about what really happened at Belle River Plantation during those 2 strange years, about the twin daughters of Colonel Nathaniel Sutton, and about the enslaved man named Marcus, who somehow managed to write everything down before he disappeared. What you're about to hear has been rebuilt from old letters that survived by chance, medical files from Mobile, and sworn statements given to a Northern abolitionist group that stayed locked away until 1963. Before we continue the tale of the Sutton sisters and the secrets that swallowed an entire community, make sure you're subscribed to Liturgy of Fear and tap the notification bell. We uncover the darkest parts of American history that school books refuse to mention. Leave a comment telling us which state or city you're listening from. We always enjoy knowing where our audience encounters these forgotten terrors. The truth about Belle River Plantation does not begin with the fire, but with a funeral 2 years earlier, and with 2 young women raised to believe that survival meant total control. Lowndes County in 1847 spread across some of the richest cotton-producing soil in Alabama, black fertile earth that made landowners wealthy and divided the land into sprawling estates, with tall white-columned houses surrounded by cotton fields stretching toward the horizon. The county seat, Hanville, sat at the center, a small cluster of brick buildings and dusty streets where plantation owners handled business while their wives pretended not to see where the household fortunes truly came from. Belle River Plantation sat 8 miles south of town, reachable only by a private road that wound through groves of water oak and crossed 2 narrow branches of the Alabama River. Colonel Nathaniel Sutton built the main house in 1828, a 3-story home with 12 rooms and a separate kitchen house connected by a covered walkway. The slave quarters, 24 cabins in 2 neat rows, stood a quarter-mile behind the main residence, close enough to be called on quickly but far enough that the colonel didn't have to hear the sounds of the people he owned. The colonel earned his wealth from cotton, but his reputation came from something very different. He had served in the Creek War under Andrew Jackson and returned from that conflict with a fixed belief that human beings could be shaped and improved through controlled breeding, just as livestock were. His library was filled with medical books from Philadelphia, agricultural J. Arnold's from Virginia, and letters exchanged with men at universities who shared his ideas about racial order and biological destiny. He kept detailed notes, measurements, charts, and family lines traced through several generations. His neighbors called him odd but brilliant. The enslaved people had other names for him, though never where white ears could hear. The colonel never married. Instead, in 1824, he bought a woman named Ruth from a Charleston trader, described in the bill of sale as of unusually light complexion and graceful manner. Ruth gave birth to twin girls, Sarah and Catherine, in 1825. The colonel raised them inside the main house, hired tutors from Mobile to teach them, dressed them in expensive clothing from New Orleans, but he never freed them. He never acknowledged them as his children in any legal record. On paper, they remained his property, an arrangement that gave him total authority over every part of their lives. Sarah and Catherine grew up in strange isolation. They learned to read, write, paint watercolors, and play the pianoforte. They studied literature, arithmetic, geography, and French, but they rarely left the plantation. The colonel controlled who they met and when, judging every potential visitor through his own strict standards. He told them they were extraordinary, that they had advantages others didn't, but that the world outside Belle River would never accept them. He taught them that safety came from staying hidden, that trust was dangerous, and that power, no matter how small, was the only thing that counted. The twins absorbed these lessons too well. They developed their own silent language of looks and gestures. They finished each other's sentences, sometimes staying wordless for days and talking only through notes passed across the dining table. They wore matching dresses in different colors, Sarah in dark green, Catherine in deep blue. They read the same novels at the same pace, one starting from the first page, the other from the last, meeting in the middle. They shared everything: combs, jewelry, secrets, and later something heavier and far more dangerous. Their mother, Ruth, died in 1839, officially from pneumonia, though people in the quarters whispered about bruises on her arms and fear in her expression during her final days. After she died, the colonel tightened his control over his daughters like a rope pulling tighter each year. He installed locks on their bedroom doors that only opened from the outside. He ordered them to write weekly reports describing their routines, their thoughts, even their dreams. He began testing them, leaving coins or valuables in plain sight to see if they would steal, arranging meetings with young men to observe their reactions, creating situations meant to expose any disobedience. Meanwhile, the plantation grew more profitable. By 1847, the colonel owned 63 enslaved people whose labor produced 142 bales of cotton each year. He sent his harvest to Mobile, reinvested the profits in more land, more enslaved laborers, and more books for his growing library. His slave population at Belle River had a strange pattern. Many light-skinned individuals, more children than expected for the birth rate, and a troubling habit of families being separated and sold just as children reached adolescence. The overseer, Jonas Pritchett, had worked at Belle River for 15 years. He lived in a cottage near the quarters and followed the colonel's orders with cold precision. He kept his own notes, punishment logs, daily work lists, food restrictions for those the colonel selected for his breeding program. These notebooks, filled with Pritchett's cramped handwriting, recorded horrors with the calm tone of farming reports: which women were forced into certain cabins, which men fathered which children, which pregnancies were ended, and how those endings were carried out. Inside the main house, the twins understood more than their father imagined. They read his journals when he was away in Mobile. They listened through doors and pieced together the whispered conversations between Pritchett and the colonel. They knew what happened in the quarters after nightfall. They knew which enslaved children were actually their half-siblings. They understood that their father viewed human beings as specimens in his private study of racial theories, and they learned to hate him with a cold, steady anger that would have terrified him if he had ever recognized it. The morning of February 3rd, 1847 came unusually warm, with temperatures rising into the low 60s by midday. Colonel Sutton spent the previous evening in his study writing letters to a professor at the Medical College of South Carolina. The household staff noticed nothing unusual when he failed to appear for breakfast. He often worked through the night. It was Pritchett who found him at 10 o'clock, sitting slumped in his leather chair, papers scattered across the desk. The colonel's skin looked slightly gray, and when Pritchett touched his hand, it felt cold and stiff. Dr. Amos Grayfield arrived from Hanville 2 hours later and declared Colonel Sutton dead, estimating he had died sometime between midnight and sunrise. "Heart failure," Dr. Grayfield said quickly, barely examining the body. The man was 56, worked himself too hard. I warned him his temperament and constant mental strain would catch up with him. But a few details did not match this simple explanation. The colonel's dinner tray from the night before sat on a side table with the food mostly untouched. A cup of coffee had cooled completely and showed a strange glittering residue at the bottom. A letter addressed to his attorney in Mobile remained unfinished. stopping mid-sentence. "I have made certain arrangements regarding the future of my daughters which must be carried out exactly as instructed for their protection and for the preservation of my life's work. Should any person attempt to—" The penstroke faded off the page as if his hand lost strength at that moment. Sarah and Catherine stood together in the hallway outside the study, wearing matching black dresses for mourning, somehow already prepared, despite no one informing them early. Their faces held no tears, no shock. They simply held hands and watched with cool, steady expressions. "We should examine him more thoroughly," suggested Mr. Harold Breenidge, a neighboring planter who came to pay respects. "Nathaniel was in good health when I saw him at the courthouse last month. This is sudden." "The colonel worked himself into the grave," Dr. Grayfield snapped, annoyed at being challenged. "I've seen this many times. The body fails, that is all. I will speak with the daughters about the funeral arrangements." But Dr. Grayfield never had that chance. Sarah spoke first, her voice calm and cold. "Dr. Grayfield, we thank you for coming. The funeral will take place in 3 days in the family plot. Our father's attorney, Mr. Jeremiah Osgood from Mobile, has been notified and will arrive tomorrow evening. Until the will is read and the estate settled, my sister and I will manage all plantation affairs. Mr. Pritchett will continue as overseer under our direction." The men exchanged wary looks. Women did not run plantations, especially unmarried young women barely 22. And there was something else, something they couldn't name, a sense that Sarah and Catherine had expected this moment and knew exactly how to move forward. "Now, Miss Sarah," Mr. Breenidge began in a condescending voice, "surely you don't intend—" "Our father prepared us for this exact responsibility," Catherine interrupted. "We understand crop cycles, market conditions, and labor management. We know every part of this plantation." What the men did not know was that the twins had prepared for this for months. They studied the account books, memorized every enslaved person's abilities, learned which businessmen in Hanville could be influenced and which could not. They had planned for every possibility except the one they faced now, the exact conditions of their father's will. The funeral was held on February 6th under gray skies that threatened rain, but never delivered. 43 neighbors and business partners came to the service, gathering in the parlor where the colonel lay in a walnut. Casket lined with white satin, the Reverend Samuel Yates gave a glowing eulogy praising the colonel's contributions to cotton agriculture and his dedication to scientific progress. Not a single enslaved person attended the funeral, though that evening the quarters held their own ceremony. Their songs blended Christian hymns with older traditions, celebrating release and the balancing of debts. Their voices stayed low, but the sound drifted across the fields to the main house where Sarah and Catherine sat on the veranda. "They think they're free now," Sarah murmured. "They will learn otherwise," Catherine replied. Jeremiah Osgood arrived the day after the funeral, a heavy-set man of 50 with silver hair and the cautious manner of someone used to delivering bad news to powerful people. He brought a leather satchel holding Colonel Sutton's will and several sealed papers marked only for the twins. The reading took place in the study, now scrubbed clean of anything connected to the colonel's final hours. Sarah and Catherine sat together on a settee, their mourning dresses whispering softly as they shifted. Pritchett stood near the door, silent but watchful. Osgood opened his satchel and pulled out a thick document tied with black ribbon. "Your father revised his will on December 12th, 1846, less than 2 months before his death. Some parts of it are unusual." He read the standard sections first, charitable gifts, personal items. Then he reached the main portion concerning the plantation. "To my daughters, Sarah and Catherine Sutton, I leave the entire Bell River plantation, lands, buildings, animals, equipment, and human property, to be owned jointly and equally. However, this inheritance depends on certain conditions that must be completed within 24 months of my death." Osgood hesitated before continuing. First, both daughters must enter lawful Christian marriages with men of suitable character approved by the estate's executors. Second, both marriages must produce legitimate children within the required period. Third, the plantation must be maintained at its present level of productivity. Sarah's grip tightened around Catherine's hand. "If these conditions are not met," Osgood said, voice lowering, "the entire plantation will be sold at public auction, and the proceeds distributed to the following charitable and scientific institutions." It was the Colonel's final attempt to make sure his beliefs survived him. "There is also a private letter," Osgood added, handing it to Sarah. But the last paragraph was the most chilling. He wrote that he had contacts all over the state watching them, reporting on their behavior. "Remember," he wrote, "you are what I made you. The blood in your veins is both your advantage and your cage." Sarah closed the letter and asked, "Who is executor?" "I am," Osgood answered, "along with Mr. Breenidge. We must approve any suitors. You have until February 1849. After he left, the twins stayed in the study. Catherine sat in their father's chair, and Sarah perched on the arm. They looked at the shelves filled with journals documenting years of cruelty dressed up as science. "We can't find husbands in 24 months, Catherine whispered. "He planned this to make us fail." "Not if we control every detail," Sarah said. "Father taught us that much. He believed people could be shaped like animals. We will prove him right, but not the way he imagined." "What do you mean?" Sarah opened the bottom drawer of the desk and pulled out a leather-bound journal. She turned to a page marked with a silk ribbon. "Father's breeding logs," she said quietly. "He wrote down everything, every pairing he arranged, every result, the bloodlines he thought were strongest, the individuals he selected for his program. And from that moment, the twins began forming a plan that would take them, the plantation, and the entire county toward the fire that would consume everything 2 years later." Catherine leaned over, reading alongside her. The entries were clinical and cold, treating people as if they were nothing more than livestock. Purchased male, roughly 25 years from the Williamson estate. Strong teeth, healthy back, quick learner. Letters on the back suggested prior ownership in Virginia, paired with female number 4. Results: 1 male child, sold 1837. 1 female child kept for future breeding. "He was a monster," Catherine whispered. "He was," Sarah agreed, "but also meticulous. And hidden within these records lay the answer to their problem." Over the next weeks, Sarah and Catherine buried themselves in their father's documentation. They uncovered the full extent of his obsessions, journals covering 20 years, detailed family trees, precise measurements, notes on temperament and skill. He treated Belle River as an experiment, its enslaved people as test subjects, all to prove his ideas about racial hierarchies and human improvement. Yet in those records they discovered something unexpected: signs of intelligence, resilience, and quiet defiance among the very people their father tried to reduce to numbers. Slaves who taught themselves to read despite rules. Women using herbs and traditional knowledge to control fertility, quietly undermining the Colonel's breeding schemes. Men who sabotaged equipment, slowing work in ways that seemed accidental. Their father recorded these failures without realizing they were acts of resistance. One name kept appearing in later journals, always with notes of frustration: Ruth, their mother. The Colonel had bought her expecting obedience and childbearing for his experiments. Instead, he encountered a woman who resisted him in subtle, consistent ways, teaching her daughters to read while he was away, whispering memories of a life before slavery, planting seeds of doubt about his absolute power. "She tried to protect us," Catherine said, and tracing her finger over their mother's name, "even when she couldn't save herself." "Then we owe her more than survival," Sarah replied. "We owe her triumph." But triumph required resources, time, and one more thing they didn't yet have: a man they could fully control, whose presence would meet the letter of their father's will while breaking its spirit. The solution came in late April, though they did not recognize it at first. The spring auction in Haynesville brought sellers and buyers from all over central Alabama, turning the courthouse square into a marketplace of human misery. Enslaved people stood on raised platforms while white men examined them like cattle, checking teeth and muscle, asking intrusive questions about work history and health. Dust, sweat, and fear filled the air. Sarah and Catherine went with Pritchett, ostensibly to buy more field hands for their expanding land. They wore black mourning veils, hiding their identities while allowing them to observe without scrutiny. Morning sales followed the expected pattern. Field workers went to plantations, house slav, as to town families, children were torn from parents and sold separately. But just before noon, something unusual appeared. Next lot, the auctioneer called. Property of the Granville estate, recently deceased. One male, about 28, named Marcus. He had his letters, experience working as a house servant and tutor to the Granville children. No record of rebellion, no attempts to escape. Starting bid, $1,000. Marcus stood tall on the platform, his gaze steady, neither defiant nor submissive. His clothes were clean but worn, hands of someone who worked with books, not cotton, showing no calluses. His skin was lighter than most, hinting at mixed ancestry. But Sarah noticed something else: the way he scanned the crowd, calculating, evaluating potential buyers as they evaluated him. "Educated. Slave is risky," someone shouted. "Gets ideas above his station. Perfect for a house needing bookkeeping." The auctioneer continued. "Who here can manage their own accounts? Here's a man who can do it for you. Starting at 1,000. Bidding opened slowly. Most planters avoided educated male slaves. Too risky, could read abolitionist papers, forge passes. But a few town merchants saw value in someone who could handle stores and letters. Sarah leaned toe. "Odd Pritchett." "Bid, Miss Sarah." "No need," he said, raising his hand. 1,000. 1,200? countered a Montgomery merchant. 1,300, Pritchett called. Bidding rose to 1,600 before the merchant left, shaking his head at the high price for one educated male. Sarah had overpaid, fueling gossip for weeks. Marcus arrived at Bell River 3 days later, walking the 8 miles from Haynesville with a few belongings in a cloth bag. Pritchett led him directly to the main house where Sarah and Catherine waited in the study. "You can read and write," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." Marcus's voice was careful, revealing nothing. "You tutored the Granville children. What did you teach them? Reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, and history, whatever their father asked." Catherine circled him, studying. The Granvilles were Quaker abolitionists, allowing their slaves to be educated. For the first time, something flickered in Marcus's eyes, fatigue or recognition that this conversation was layered. Mr. Granville believed all people had minds and souls worth nurturing. "And you?" Sarah asked. "I believe I stand before 2 women who overpaid for me and have a plan beyond fieldwork." The twins exchanged looks. Their father treated slaves as objects incapable of independent thought. Marcus proved both within 30 seconds. "We have a special situation," Sarah said. "Our father died recently, leaving inheritance conditions that need careful planning. We need someone educated, discreet, and able to understand complex arrangements." "What arrangements?" "Those that must stay private," Catherine said. "You'll live in the main house, not the quarters. have access to our father's library, be well fed, and treated better than most. In return, you'll obey exactly what we say, without question. Marcus stayed silent. If I refuse? Then you'll be sold south, Sarah said, to Mississippi cotton plantations, where educated slaves are worked to death to erase their minds. I can have you shipped in a week. It wasn't empty, and Marcus knew it. What do you want from me? That depends, Catherine said. Can you keep secrets, even dangerous ones? I've kept secrets all my life, ma'am, to survive. Sarah looked out across the plantation. Our father's will says we must marry within 24 months or lose everything, but we won't marry men who treat us as property. We'll subvert the terms while technically obeying. I don't understand. You will, Catherine said. First, we must see if you can be trusted completely. Over days they tested Marcus, subtly and directly. They let him explore the library, asked about politics, observed him with other enslaved people. Marcus adapted, spoke carefully, showed intelligence honed by navigating dangerous situations. Educated slaves were valuable, but dangerous. What the twins didn't know, Marcus had his own secrets. The Granvilles were Quakers who documented atrocities, gathering testimonies from enslaved people. Marcus spent 5 years recording names, dates, events in coded shorthand. When the Granvilles died, their estate sold, but Marcus rescued crucial notebooks, hiding them in a hollow Bible. He expected observation and documentation at Bell River, but found himself part of something far riskier. By mid-May, his role was clear: private secretary, managing household accounts and correspondence, and confit. A daunt in a plan they hadn't yet fully explained. Sarah revealed the scheme in early June, after the house slaves retired. Our father's will demands we marry and bear children in 24 months, she began. Executives approve husbands, but suitability only for external criteria. Marcus frowned. Catherine smiled, sharp and almost feral. We'll marry men we can control, elderly, sickly, or desperate for wealth. Men who give legal legitimacy, but no interference at Bell River. And the children? Marcus asked. Biology is biology, Sarah said. Our father spent 20 years showing lineage can be managed. Executives need to see marriages and pregnancies. Behind closed doors, we act freely. The implications hit Marcus like cold water. Hay wanted him to father children, creating the appearance of legitimate heirs, while the twins maintained control. You want me to commit an act that could get us killed, he said. If anyone discovers, no one will, Catherine said. We control the house completely. Marriages arranged, evidence managed. You'll be protected. Protected? Marcus laughed bitterly. I'm a slave. Protection is nothing. If this fails, you'll be ruined socially. I may be killed. Exactly why you'll ensure success, Sarah said. In exchange, you get something worth the risk. What's worth freedom? Catherine said quietly. Legal freedom, funds, escape north. After children are born, the estate secure, you'll be manumitted with a cover story. Marcus studied them for deceit. And if I refuse? You won't, Sarah said. You want freedom more than fear, death. He knew she was right, but he also saw opportunity, exposing the Sutton family, the Colonel's experiments, the network of complicit planters. I'll do it, he said, on one condition. You can't set conditions, Catherine said. I am. I want everything, journals, letters, logs. If I risk my life, I need full knowledge. Agreed, Sarah said. You study them here under supervision. On. Nothing leaves the house. None spoke aloud, but each had made a bargain with someone they did not fully trust, gambling futures on a plan so audacious it could succeed only if every detail aligned. In Lown County, Alabama, 1847, perfection was scarce. The summer heat made physical labor brutal, but behind shutters and curtains, another pressure grew. Sarah and Catherine sought husbands with the cold strategy their father taught, men who met executive standards but could be manipulated. Lists were compiled from Osgood's suggestions and local observation. First candidate, Mr. Edmund Varley, 68, widower, cotton failing after sons moved to Texas, friend of the colonel, keen to marry one of the twins. Beautiful opportunity, he declared in July, his watery eyes roaming Catherine. Union of properties. Continue your father's legacy. I'll guide you in plantation management. Catherine smiled silently. After he left, she scrubbed her hands raw as if to erase his touch. He'll do, Sarah said clinically. Desperate to restore reputation, he'll accept prenuptial terms. I can't, Catherine whispered. Sarah, I can't let him touch me. He won't. That's the point. Legal ficta. Ion, Marcus' father's child, Vlay gets credit, twins retain control. But arranging two such marriages was harder than expected. Executives, especially Breenidge, had opinions on matches. Sarah suggested a 42-year-old mobile merchant. Breenidge rejected him. Unsuitable background, he said. Your father intended planter families, not merchants. Twins arg. The will says only men of character and standing. Breenidge threatened court clarification. He's forcing us into beneficial marriages, Sarah fumed. He has sons, likely angling for us. While negotiations continued, Marcus delved into Colonel Sutton's papers. What he found surpassed expectations. The colonel's breeding program ran for 2 decades with cruel precision. Specific pairings were enforced. Children sold if they didn't fit. Families separated without concern. For human bonds, he recorded everything in clinical terms that turned people into data points. Female number 7 resisted breeding assignments. He suggested stricter isolation to force compliance. But the journals also revealed something else, proof of a network. The colonel had not worked alone. He communicated with other planters, doctors, and academics at southern universities. They shared findings, compared methods, and discussed ways to support their ideas about racial hierarchies and human improvement. Marcus carefully copied the most incriminating entries using paper Sarah kept for household accounts, writing late at night after the twins had gone to bed. He hid the copies in a hollowed section of his mattress, creating a secret archive that would eventually go north. He also noticed details the twins never mentioned. The pattern of sickness among Belle River's enslaved population. In late July, 3 women in the quarters showed symptoms: lesions, fever, worsening weakness. Pritchett casually suggested isolation and minimal care until recovery or death. But Marcus, having read the colonel's private medical notes, recognized syphilis. The colonel had infected multiple women, either intentionally for research or through systematic sexual abuse. Now the disease was spreading among couples and from mothers to infants. Marcus brought his findings to Sarah and Catherine one evening, showing the medical text with their father's notes. Your father gave them syphilis. Either he caught it himself and spread it, or he infected them on purpose. The journals suggest both, and it's killing them. Catherine's face went pale. How many? At least 7 showing signs, but syphilis can hide for years. There's no way to know who is infected without proper examination, and even then, it's uncertain. Sarah stood abruptly by the window, her posture rigid. Can it be treated? Mercury sometimes works, but it's almost as dangerous as the disease, costly, and needs a doctor willing to treat enslaved people properly, which Marcus didn't need. To finish saying. Do it anyway, Sarah said without looking back. Get the medicines from Mobile. Have a doctor come, and if he refuses, find someone who will. Miss Sarah, the cost. I don't care. Our father did this. We won't let them die from his cruelty. It was the first crack in tea. He twins' facade Marcus had seen. The first sign they might be driven by more than self-preservation. He filed it as important information. Dr. Grayfield arrived 2 days later, irritated to be called to treat slaves. He examined the women with thinly veiled disgust, confirmed the diagnosis, and prescribed mercury with cheerful indifference to survival. Treatment. Tea takes months, he said, washing his hands. Results not guaranteed. Might be cheaper to isolate them and let nature decide. We'll follow your prescription, Catherine said coldly. You'll need to examine all enslaved people and find every potential case. Grayfield raised his eyebrows. That's over 40 people. Expense is yours. When can you start? Examinations lasted 3 days in August, held in a cabin cleared by Pritchett. Grayfield worked efficiently, recording symptoms in a ledger, giving diagnoses like a livestock inspector. The count was worse than Marcus expected. 14 confirmed cases, 8 probable. Almost a third of Belle River's enslaved population had been infected by the colonel's systematic abuse. Sarah and Catherine listened in silence. Then Sarah made a decision that would shock their father and confuse the neighbors. "We're treating all of them," she said. "Get the mercury, bandages, everything needed. Better food for the sick to survive treatment. Reduce work quotas. Marcus, you'll oversee the treatment and keep records," Miss Sarah Pritchett objected. "This will cost thousands and reduce productivity. Your father never." "Our father did this to them," Catherine said. "We are fixing his damage. Cost doesn't matter. The twins didn't fully articulate their motivation. Partly pragmatic. Dead slaves don't work, and the plantation depends on labor. Partly guilt, aware they'd been part of their father's system, then, as victims. But partly something else. They realized their father's worst crime wasn't only what he did, but believing other people existed only to serve him. Raised the same way, they now faced the human cost and had to choose who they would become. Marcus watched, confused. He expected monsters, people who saw him as less than human. Instead, 2 women twisted by abuse struggled to reclaim humanity. They weren't allies. He didn't trust them, but it complicated his view of oppressor and oppressed. Meanwhile, marriage negotiations hit a crisis. In September, Breenidge came with a proposal. His nephew, Thomas Breenidge, 34, returned from New Orleans after failed cotton dealings. He needed a fresh start and a wealthy connection. Sarah needed a husband executives would approve. Perfect match, Breenidge decided. Thomas has good breeding, understands plantations, will provide guidance. Sarah met Thomas twice. Weak, vain, in debt. Perfect for her. "I'll agree," she told Breenidge, "with conditions. Prenuptial, giving me sole management of Belle River. Thomas gets an income, no decision power, marriage waits until my sister's match is arranged. Highly unusual terms, non-negotiable." Thomas agreed, signing a contract making him a paid figurehead in return for status and debt relief. Catherine's match was harder. Edmund Vlay lost patience and sought another. Executives rejected 3 candidates. Time ran short. Deadline February 1849, already October 1847. Then Catherine suggested, "What if I don't marry?" Sarah looked up. "The will requires both marry within 24 months. Says nothing about remaining married. I could marry, become pregnant, then accidents happen, especially to sickly husbands." Silence filled the room. Marcus, at the desk copying correspondence, felt ice run down his spine. "You mean murder," he whispered. "I mean fulfill the will by any means," Catherine replied. "He didn't say husbands must survive." "Catherine," Sarah began, "don't pretend you haven't thought about it. Thomas will be a problem. Weak, but not dumb. Once married, he'll assert authority. Men do. Always." Sarah didn't argue. Marcus realized he miscalculated. The twins were victims, yes, but their father's daughters in ways deeper than blood. They viewed people as obstacles to manage or remove. "If you plan murder," he said carefully, "I refuse. That's not what I agreed." "You agreed to obey," Catherine reminded him, or be sold south. Then sell me south. I won't take part in murder. The twins exchanged glances. Sarah softened. Catherine speaks theoretically. We aren't planning murder, but all possibilities matter. Complicated situation. Marcus didn't believe her, but had no good options. Refuse, and he could be sold and records lost. Report, he'd be dismissed, likely executed. So he nodded, agreeing, preparing for inevitable danger. November brought frost. Sarah's wedding to Thomas Breenidge set for December 15th at Bell River, Re. Verand Yates officiating. Catherine as maid of honor, executives would witness. Behind preparations, darker plans formed. Sarah and Marcus began a physical relationship in early November in the locked study after Catherine retired. Sarah approached it coldly, like plantation management. Reproduction, not intimacy, necessary for goals. Marcus found it disturbing, not because of racial taboo, but emotional emptiness, her ability to separate acts from human connection. "My father forced dozens into this," she said one night. "I swore I'd never be like him. Yet here I am." "You're not forcing me," Marcus said, but threat of sale hung over all. "You're enslaved. No consent possible. I tell myself it's different. I offer freedom afterward. We are partners in deception. But I own you. No consent." Most honest thing she said, made it worse. By mid-November, Sarah was pregnant. Dr. Grayfield confirmed while checking syphilis treatment. Executives delighted. One condition met. Thomas, arriving 2 weeks prior, accepted with oblivious pride. Catherine, still undecided, rejected 6 husbands, deadline near. Early December she found a suitable match. Mr. Lawrence Kemper, 51, widower, small Wilcox plantation, moderate wealth, no children. "Need to meet him," Breenidge said. "Of course." December 8th, Kemper arrived, thin, nervous, gray hair, cough surge, sting consumption. Spoke little, deferred to Catherine, grateful for attention. "Perfect," Catherine told Marcus. "Executives will approve. He'll be dead in a year, leaving me free. Let him die of consumption. I'll let nature decide. Murder?" Marcus had no answer. Sarah's wedding. Cold, clear December day. 40 guests. Bell River parlor filled with perfume, wood smoke. Reverend Yates officiated somnambulantly. Thomas pleased, believing he secured a prize. Sarah in ivory silk. Expres. Sion blank. Marcus watched from back, as staff. Saw her speak vows, accept kiss, smile to guests unaware of performance. That night, after guests left, Thomas drunk in quarters, Sarah came to study. "It's done," she said. "First condition met. Thomas will obey. Comfortable life, annual income, appearance of authority. He stays out of way. No questions about operations." He agreed. "I purchased his cooperation like yours, Marcus. I'm my father's daughter." Bitterness in her voice, Marcus saw danger. Self-hatred, unpredictable actions, or terrible ones to show indifference. See. Catherine's wedding, January 20th, 1848. Executives approved Kemper. Weeks between weddings, Bell River staff whispered arguments, raised voices. Pritchett noted distraction, decisions overturned hours later. Marcus understood. Strain of deception, Sarah's guilt, Catherine's cold calculation fractured their unity. Night before Catherine's wedding, Marcus, in study copying documents, he screams, found twins in Sarah's bedroom. Catherine, nose bleeding, Sarah scratched. She wants to kill him. Sarah shouted, "Not wait, poison him, dying anyway." Catherine screamed, "Arsenic, 6 months, widow, pregnant." Marcus understood their plan. "You killed your father," he said. Sarah sank, face in hands. Arsenic with powdered glass in coffee, small amounts 3 weeks, looked like heart failure. Dr. Grayfield suspected nothing. "We had to," Catherine said. Father was going to sell Marcus and others, force us into marriages to continue breeding program, and, oh, choice. Always choice, Marcus said quietly. Easy for you, Catherine snapped. You're not trapped in cage built by man who viewed you as experiments. I'm trapped too, just differently. Never killed anyone to escape. Argument might have continued, but Marcus stayed silent, realizing the full weight of what he'd uncovered. They heard footsteps coming up the stairs, uneven and heavy. Thomas was stumbling in a drunken haze toward his wife's bedroom. The three conspirators fell completely silent, listening as he cursed under his breath while struggling with the door handle, then gave up and wandered away down the hall. When his steps faded, Sarah spoke in a soft, strained voice. "We cannot keep doing this, Catherine. If you poison Lawrence, it will all fall apart. Someone will notice something. Someone will start digging. And everything, the plantation, our freedom, Marcus's records, all of it will be ruined. Then what do you suggest? We are running out of time." "We wait," Sarah said. "We let nature finish what it has already started with Lawrence. We endure a little longer. And when it is finally done, when we complete Father's terms and secure the inheritance, then we decide what kind of people we choose to be." Catherine did not speak for several seconds. When she finally did, her voice sounded worn and empty. "I don't know if I can endure anything anymore. I don't know if there is anything left of me that can be saved." Marcus, watching both sisters, realized he had been documenting the wrong story all along. He had been focusing on the Colonel's cruelty, the careful system of abuse, the forced breeding. But the real nightmare of Belle River was not only what had been done to enslaved people, though that was horrible enough. It was what had been done to the twins themselves, the way their father had molded them into tools and set them against each other like weapons. They were both victims and participants at the same time, locked in roles they now chose, but now carried out with growing desperation. And Marcus was stuck with them, his own safety tied to a plan that seemed more likely each day to explode in terrible violence. Catherine's marriage to Lawrence Kemper took place on January 20th, 1848. It was a small ceremony with only 20 guests. Kemper looked painfully thin, his cough sharper in the cold winter air. He needed Catherine's arm just to walk into the parlor where Reverend Yates waited. The ceremony was short, no more than 12 minutes. When Yates declared them husband and wife, Kemper tried to kiss Catherine but was hit by a coughing fit so harsh that it left spots of blood on his handkerchief. "Consumption's got him badly," Dr. Grayfield muttered to Breenidge. 6 months at most, probably less. Lawrence moved into Belle River that evening and chose a bedroom far from Catherine's. He seemed almost pathetically thankful for every small courtesy, thanking the servants again and again for simple things like bringing water or lighting his fire. Catherine and Marcus began their arranged meetings in early February. Unlike Sarah, who approached the situation with bitter honesty, Catherine treated the encounters like business that needed to be completed quickly. She set exact times and left immediately afterward. Why? That talking. By March, Catherine was pregnant. Lawrence, confined to his bed as his illness grew worse, accepted the news with confused happiness. "Thank God," he whispered. "Eekly. You'll have something to remember me by." The executors arrived in April to confirm both pregnancies. They found everything correct. Both sisters were married, both expecting children, and cotton production had not suffered. Breenidge said he was satisfied. Meanwhile, Marcus spent his nights writing everything down. He now had proof of the Colonel's breeding program, the spread of syphilis, the poisoning attempts, and the marriage arrangement. But he could not figure out how to get these papers to the North without being caught and killed. In May, a traveling preacher named Jacob Sturgis arrived at Belle River saying he was collecting donations for missions. During dinner, Sturgis casually mentioned he had spent time in Philadelphia. Marcus noticed the way he said it. Philadelphia was a known center for abolitionists. Marcus made a small hand sign used among